what's available.
Pizza day is not a bad day.
No, it's never a bad day.
Pizza's the best. Best food ever created.
Cannot go wrong.
All right, let's jump in. It's 11:03. So thanks to everyone for joining us today. I'm Abby Prince, and I'm the Managing Director here at CSS ProSearch. I've been with the company for 19 years, and have built a team that specifically focuses on placing sales reps and leaders in the healthcare, technology, and consulting industries. Our team has supported the accelerated growth of more than 2,500 companies and has recruited more than 13,000 top-performing sales reps over the years. Sales leaders heavily rely on us to help find them those top-performing sales executives who are passively on the job market. Our mission is to deliver the perfect fit for each organization, which in turn is supported by our 95% client retention rate. We're excited to be launching our second sales webinar today, and we're proud that our guest speaker is an amazing sales leader who we personally placed in his role today. This program will last about 60 minutes, 45 minutes for the presentation, and at the end, there will be a Q&A session for the last 15 minutes of the program. Please submit your questions into the chat box, and we'll answer your questions, if not during the call, then at the end. Our technical moderator, Nick, has muted everyone, so please use the chat feature if you're having any issues at all. If you're new to Zoom, then put your mouse in the top right corner of the screen to control your individual viewing options that only you can change. It's called the gallery view to see everyone, or use the speaker view to just see whoever is speaking at that time. Now, I would like to introduce our speakers today, Stephanie Staiano, our Sales Director at CSS ProSearch, and our subject matter expert, Dave Costa, Head of North American Sales with Re-Leased Software. Together, Dave and Steph will break down how he is successfully leading his team through this time of uncertainty and taking them down a path of having their best revenue achievement in company history. With that said, let's hand it over to Steph to introduce our guest, Dave Costa.
Thanks, Abby. Hey guys, I'm Stephanie Staiano. I've been here, the sales director at CSS ProSearch, been here for about 6.5 years. As the sales teams right now, as we're seeing across the country shift into this reality of a new normal, all the sales teams we're finding are being faced with the challenge of finding a way to succeed. It's times like this that we're really seeing sales reps being able to separate themselves. Are you average? Are you an all-star performer? It's kind of led to the question of, can you still find a way to bring in sales when the world is changing? Dave and I had a great conversation a couple of months ago that was exactly around that. How are we going to still be effective? And even right now, when that's our job is to sell and bring in revenue. And he came up with some great ideas and was kind of walking me through how he'd been able to do that. And so I felt it was pertinent for us to maybe share some of those tips with all of you. So our guest Dave and his team at Re-Leased Software have responded to this market with record-breaking revenue gains. Since the beginning of COVID, they've posted their best back-to-back revenue months in North American history. And even more impressive, they've done all that with opportunities that they've added to the pipeline during April and May, during a time when we know as sales reps, it can be really difficult to find new business. So right now we're going to get into the specifics on the call, but I'd like to introduce you guys to Dave. He is the head of North American sales at Re-Leased Software. He comes with a really impressive career trajectory. He started out at Paycom, where he quickly established himself as a top-tier sales producer and a high-potential employee. He made President's Club his first 2 years in a row, was then promoted to manager, increased that office's revenue and year-over-year sales by 60%, had 2 of his reps promoted, and then went on to win President's Club again as a sales manager there. He took over as head of North American sales last year, and he's had an immediate impact. You can really tell that his passion for driving culture while keeping heavily focused on sales is what's awarded him this reputation of being a top performer, but someone who can practice what he preaches. So I hope that bio was all right, Dave. I hope it was all accurate.
It's accurate. I hope I can live up to it. I don't know.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself if you want to share, or maybe a little bit about Re-Leased?
Yeah. So like Steph said, and I appreciate that, I took over as the head of North American sales for Re-Leased. We focus on the commercial market in particular in terms of just providing technology for groups to manage all aspects of their portfolio from a singular place. So, everything from lease management to maintenance requests to managing past due payments, all of that through one single database, essentially. And so that's a little bit what we do. And I'm excited for today's conversation. I think obviously there's always challenges in sales, and this is just giving people a very valid excuse to push things off and to not buy and to just kind of have real objections that they're facing. And I guess the initial message I have for today is there's not like a magic bullet for this. There's not something that, we are doing that's, revolutionary. I think it's just a matter of looking at sales the way it always has been. COVID's just another objection. It really just is. And it's a very valid one. And obviously there's sensitivity that needs to be there, but there are groups that are buying, and it's our job as salespeople to find those and spend the time with those who can buy and will buy. And if you do that, I think you'll be successful. So, yeah.
So then we've all obviously seen a shift during COVID, but that's led to also an economic downturn that's even more severe than what we saw in 2008. So it's kind of coupled. You're seeing almost a double whammy right now. So revenue aside, what is the biggest change that you've seen in your business so far over the past few months?
So I think this is something we were talking about the other day, Steph, and I think it's industry to industry. So for us, what we're looking at is obviously everybody's now working from home and working remotely. So that presents a couple of challenges. So if you're a sales leader like myself, you have a team of people that you're now managing remotely. It's the first time I've ever managed a team of people remotely. So that presents some challenges, because how do you make sure you're maximizing productivity? But to me, more importantly, how do you make sure that that energy and that morale is still high while they're working wherever they're working and all of that? Because that engagement is really critical. The other piece is you have to look at industry by industry, and you have to assess, okay, how has the industry been affected and been changing because of what's going on in the world today? So for us, we have organizations to where they're not collecting the same amount of rent that they used to collect. They have their tenants are either shutting down or going out of business. And so they're trying to figure out, how can we even get our revenue in order to stay alive? But at the same time, in our industry, a lot of groups are just very backwards in the way they do things. They're using spreadsheets, they're using antiquated software. And so a lot of the strategic ones are starting to say, it's forcing that digital transformation, right, that you're seeing in every industry. It's basically saying we can't keep operating this way. So that's been a good thing, just in terms of the way they're thinking and in terms of how they want to accelerate out of COVID on the back end. So, every industry is different. I think the one uniform aspect of it is we're all dealing with a global pandemic. We're all dealing with some sort of economic uncertainty, and we're all now working remotely, which presents its own challenges and makes things difficult.
So then, we've seen a lot of clients. I guess in our industry, we always hear about the need to have and the nice to have products. And so we're seeing clients that are selling things like COVID testing or Zoom, for example, like this. And it's easy to understand how those would fall into the must have, the need to have category right now. But how have you been positioning Re-Leased to get your clients excited and ready to purchase and positioning it as a need to have versus a nice to have, especially right now?
No, I think that's a really valid question. I think the way to look at it is, no matter what you're selling, in my mind, you have to believe wholeheartedly that it is a must-have. If you do not believe that your product is a must-have, you're not going to have the passion that you need to have behind it in order to actually create the need, find the need, and sell through to the need. So no matter what industry you're in, if you don't believe that about your product, that's a separate problem, and that's something that we should probably have another webinar about. But it's understanding, like for us, right? You could look at Re-Leased, and there's companies that have been doing this on spreadsheets for years, right? They could justify why they don't need property management software now, and why they don't need one of the more premium ones in terms of pricing, in the market now as well. But for us, it's like, no, if you don't have this software today, how are you not going to kind of accelerate to get to your goals? And I think one thing we're going to talk about is just strategies to set appointments and strategies to prospect and all those types of things. And one of the key areas, and I think this goes back to it, is if you know your prospects well enough, if you know your ICP well enough, your product is a must-have for them, not because of what your product can do, but because of what goal they're trying to achieve, what your product can help them achieve, if that makes sense.
And ICP, for people who don't know, ideal customer profile, in case it's a lingo that someone didn't use.
You can call it whatever you want to. We used to call it rainbows at Paycom. It's whatever your ideal customer is for your business.
And really focusing in on that, which we're going to get to, because I think that's an interesting point of do you stay focused on that? Do you stray away because you're seeing dollar signs somewhere else? How important is that? Which I think that's an interesting topic. We'll be able to get to that. So you were a new addition to Re-Leased. You just started late 2019. Interesting time to start. So when you guys moved remote, how was that when you had just started to really get in the groove with your team? In some cases, you had recently hired a couple of people. How was that transition? Interesting for sure. I think there's some aspects. We literally hired somebody, I think it was the first day of COVID. So we had met him in the interview process, and his first day he started remote, and we haven't had a chance to really hang out. So there's a couple of those instances, and as the business kind of adjusts, your team adjusts and all of that. And I think it's just,
finding a way to get in the rhythm of every single day work without letting that productivity lag, and kind of trying as much as possible to create an office feel. So, and I'm sure everybody on the calls either listen to webinars or read articles about how to kind of adjust working from home. So I don't want to belabor that too much, but essentially we just have a morning call. Everybody gets on the call every single morning at 9:30. We basically strat our days. If there's something somebody needs help with, we all help them as a team. We collaborate on that. If there's something exciting we want to talk about, we do that. If people need to vent, like early on in COVID, there was just, I didn't realize people wanted to do this, but there was just people that were really just genuinely concerned, or things were going on in their life and they wanted to share that with the team. And, just kind of having that community, even though we were remote, was really helpful. Every Friday afternoon, we have a not mandatory happy hour that if somebody wants to kind of have that community feel still, we can all jump on a call for 30 minutes and just hang out. So trying to do as much as we can during this time has been interesting, but the message, I think and this is the whole point of this webinar, is nothing necessarily needs to change. The vehicle to get the result changed, but everything in between has kind of stayed the same, if that makes sense. So the metrics that everybody's striving towards are the same. Everybody knows the job that they need to do. It's just much more, there's a lot of pressure on the sales team, right? Like we need to perform to make sure that the business is stabilized long-term. So that's kind of the mantle that we've taken.
So then let's talk about how you guys have prospected and closed business. Like how, you say not a lot of stuff has changed, but you guys aren't going to face-to-face meetings anymore. Like there are people that may be giving you different pushback. So how has the way you prospect and close business, what is it like now versus what it was like before?
I think it's more so just forced us to be very good at what we do and not cut corners.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
So I think before, you can just pick up the phone as a salesperson, call somebody, convince them of why you need to show up at their office for 30 minutes and go make some magic happen because you're talented, right? I fell victim to that. I did it all the time of just, here's my simple value prop. Can I swing by your office? Let's, have a 30-minute meeting. I'll bring you a coffee, whatever you're doing in that initial cold call pitch. Hopefully it's better than what I just articulated, but you're kind of getting away with your talent. What I think COVID's done and what I think working remotely has done is it's said, okay, yeah, I get you're talented. You probably wouldn't be a top performing salesperson if you weren't. But now I got to challenge how technical of a salesperson you are on the front end, during the process, and in your closing, because you have to be perfect at all of it to succeed right now. On the front end, you have to know your customers better than they know themselves almost. You have to do your homework on every single one of them, and your pitch, going back to why your product is a must-have for them, your pitch is going to be very customized for each person that you're going to be working with or trying to reach out to. During the process, you got to capture somebody's attention on Zoom. That's one of the hardest things in the whole world. You can't really use your personality. You can't show up and, be a big presence in a room. You have to be that over a Zoom meeting. It's very tough. Another way to really do that effectively is, again, knowing your prospects better than anyone else. And then from a closing standpoint, all of a sudden, if you don't close on a Zoom call or on a go-to-meeting or whatever you guys are using, you guys know this, they can just hang up the call and never call you back. You can't just show up to their office anymore. You can't make something happen. So you have to be very technically proficient at what you do. But the steps and what you are doing to get those things to happen haven't really changed. You're still leveraging your profiling in Zoom infos, LinkedIn Sales Navigator. You're still making the cold calls. You're still email. You're still doing everything you're doing. You're just less relying on talent, and you're more so relying on process and actual, methods of getting there to do it. I think that's the key.
So in terms of like adding to your process, it doesn't sound like you've added like additional like nuance, like after a Zoom. Like, are you adding a different step? Like, obviously you're closing on it, but are you adding a different nuance step after the Zoom?
I think it's just more discipline, right? So
Okay.
I'll use the cold call example. So before you stumble across a new prospect and you pick up the phone and, you give your cold call pitch that you normally do, your value prop, you close them on a date and time. There's times before in a normal economy, in a normal non-pandemic environment where you can get away with that and set an appointment. Now, I'm never picking up the phone and calling a prospect before I know exactly how I'm going to help that prospect. And so every single cold call I have is going to be very, very specific to my target. So, for example, we're doing a webinar today on how to double, revenue during an economic downturn. So let's assume I see Joseph Simonetti. I hope I did not butcher that last name. I don't think I did.
Perfect.
So Joe, right, that's probably one of your goals for your business is doubling your revenue during an economic downturn. So when I call you, and I know that I might know that from either your LinkedIn profile, posts you've been sharing, your website, just about me, you'd be so shocked. You go to somebody's about me, our goal is to be the best in class at this. And now you know that is that company's mission, right? Their mission statement tells you everything you need to know about them. So when I call Joe, it can be something as simple as, hey, Joe, my name's Dave Costa. I noticed that your goal is to really just double your revenue during this time. That's a really awesome goal, first of all, and I can help with that. Why don't we set up some time next week to sit down and just discuss exactly how I can do that? And what it's going to do is just being extreme, and that's a very generic example, obviously, but if you're very specific with people about how you're going to help them, it at least eliminates the fluff objection. Nobody's going to sit there and tell you, I don't care about doubling my revenue during that time. They're either going to tell you a very real objection, and you can have those very real sales conversations in those moments, which are what we all want.
Getting them to the actual, getting the ability to handle the objection as a real objection versus a, I don't have time for the call, or like, I'm not the right person, those types of like fluff objections that you would get.
Because you want the real objection, and the more real conversations you can have, I mean, A, they're going to trust you more. B, you're going to understand whether they can and will buy, and it's going to allow you to be empathetic. And we'll talk about this too, but I think there's a big mistake with assuming that people are in a terrible position and they're not going to buy from you. Like and that empathy is almost like fake sympathy for everybody, and like nobody really wants that. It's like there are companies that you need to empathize with in certain ways and actually help them out of this time. Technology can do that. Staffing can do that. There's everybody on this call can do that in different ways. And to empathize with somebody is very different than being sympathetic with them.
Right.
And so I think that's, it's one very easy way to do that. So, and that's an example from the prospecting side. You got to have that type of discipline throughout. There's never going to be a time you don't send a thank you email, a follow-up email. There's never going to be a time you don't set the agenda in an email prior to it. All of those little things that sometimes fall between the wayside, if we're all being honest with ourselves, can't do that anymore. And I think that's really the only change.
Well, and it's even more important now because like you said, like before, if you could set an appointment to go in and visit someone, like it's really hard for them. You can show up with your coffee and like bringing something in. It's really hard for them to not give you 2 minutes of the time versus I said something via the phone or via email or via Zoom right now. It's really easy to just not show up, not answer, not sign on. So yeah, definitely like establishing that from the get-go. So in the beginning, I had mentioned that because when you and I spoke a couple of months ago, the thing I think I was most impressed with was that the bulk of the new opportunities that you guys have closed for your team have been opportunities you added to the funnel since like April 1 or something. So I'd love to understand like how that was the case. Because I know a lot of clients that I spoke to, like things stopped dead in their tracks. And then, I mean, Abby and I have even spoken to customers that have just dissolved their entire net new business teams. They're only they're only keeping on customer success or account managers because they've really, I don't want to say given up, but like they aren't as focused on net new business, or they weren't April, May, but you were closing a bunch of new business that you added. So talk to us about that. How were you able to do that during that time?
This is going to sound like a cop-out answer, but it's not. I think truly it's a mindset shift. So I think when COVID hit, everybody's initial reaction was, again, going back, we need to be sympathetic. We're calling people, hey, no pressure. Like, I understand you're not going to buy right now, but like, can we at least set up some time? Everybody's tiptoeing around the subject. And I think I was talking to a bunch of sales, peers that I have in my network who I very much respect, and just kind of collaborating with them. And hey, what are you doing? What are you seeing? And they're like, when we really started to see a shift in our outbounds, we started to see a shift in our new demos. We started to see a shift in just new opportunities coming into our pipeline, is when we actually started approaching everything the way we used to and had a hunter mentality and realized that there are people that actually can buy right now. There's people that are looking to buy right now. There's some people that are thriving right now, right? Like if you're having a conversation, like if Zoom was your client, I mean, Zoom's doing great. They're probably spending more money today than ever before. That's not everybody, right? But it's understanding, I think, that there are people out there that can buy and will buy, and you have to be respectful about the way you're going about it and respect people's situations, of course. But it's not taking your foot off the gas and just assuming that you're not going to go find those people. It's doing your homework on the front end, assessing exactly who is going to be in that phase of either growth today or finding the people that are in true trouble today. I mean, I had one call with a group 2 weeks ago, actually, and literally they were like, listen, we're not doing that great, but part of the reason we're not doing that great is we have no mechanism to communicate with our customers. Our tenants, we have no mechanism for that whatsoever. Our back office is still being done on spreadsheets, which is all on a server in the office that we can't get to right now. We need a software for, at least we're not going to do it right now, but when we come out of this, we're going to need to implement something, because if this were to ever happen again, we can't survive this round two. Right? So And there's groups like that all over the place. And it's understanding them where they're at, meeting them where they're at, and setting those appointments and having those conversations and going about your business that way. So I think the biggest thing is just a mindset shift.
So like, talk to me about like your general approach when reaching out to prospects in terms of research. Cause I know like everyone's always looking for, the golden phrase or email, and that just doesn't exist. Like you said, it has to be super relevant, but how much time are you actually spending doing research? Cause we can all go down like the research, like timeline where I can, all of a sudden I find myself an hour has gone by and I've researched one client. Like,
Yeah.
what is the goal? What is the in between? What's the good amount of time, or what is your process that you've espoused to your team that has made it successful? I've heard like the 5 by 5 by 5 rule. I've heard all different things.
Well, I think it's different for everybody, right? So for me, it's about how you structure your week. So when I look at my week, especially for my reps, I look at it as I need to give you dedicated time in your Monday. To me, it happens on a Monday because that's what preps you for the rest. Actually, Friday afternoon preps you for the week. But however it is, you're going to pick 3 to 4 hours that you're just going to do what I call profiling or research or whatever you want to kind of word it as, right? So when you're doing that, that time is just geared towards finding new contacts. It's finding new information, finding mission statements, finding vision statements, leveraging your technology, just do that. And so my thing to my team is, okay, take your top 100 prospects, and all of those prospects need to have a customized cold call elevator pitch, so to speak, if you will, right? To where if you got that CEO on the phone, you know exactly what you're going to say to that person. And that is going to come directly from what their goals, vision, all of that is for their organization. So it's about structuring your week. A lot of it, I would say, do on your own time, just because it's going to be it's kind of like the watching film before a football game on Sunday, right? You're not going to win the game on Sunday unless if you watch the film during the week and you practice during the week and all that. That's what research is to me. So that's the time element of it. The other piece of it is I'm a big believer in Zoom Info. I think Zoom Info is a great tool. It's going to give you it's the best source to get, different things like cell phone numbers, direct contacts, emails, all of that. But also, I mean, it can look at like the way people are leveraging Google. So if they're searching words during within your industry, you can actually see things like that. You can see.
I didn't know Zoom Info could do that. That's
yeah. It's very, very powerful. It can show you different elements of somebody's tech stack. So you can see, okay, what are they leveraging? It's not always the most accurate for that, but it's there. It'll show you just different aspects of their organization. So you get a lot just from that. Their website is also a huge, win. If you're in the nonprofit space, you guys already know this probably, but they have that form, the annual reports that are all public. They have all the information about the organization. So you just really want to sink your teeth into who an organization is, what makes them who they are, and what is their goal and what are they trying to achieve in that moment. And another thing you can do is actually call different people in the organization that aren't necessarily your target, right? So if they have a sales force, call their salespeople. Be like, hey, I'm trying to get an appointment here with you guys. I really think I can provide some value. Just have a couple questions for you. Salesperson is going to be so receptive to that. I've done that several times, just kind of getting that conversation going. Because usually there's a reciprocal type of energy that can exist there, which is pretty cool. And so you want to gather all that information, digest it, and just look at it and say, okay, now I'm calling your CEO. How can I take all this information and succinctly put it into a 2-sentence, powerful value statement that I can give to this person? And you need to have one of those for each of your top 100. And then that way you're going to differentiate, because while everybody else is calling somebody, talking about their product and talking about what they can do for the prospect, you're talking about the prospect's goals already before you even do that. And at the very least, you're probably going to get people that are like, you know what, this person took the time to research me, to know everything about me. I'm going to at least hear them out.
So it's funny. So then in Dave's world, is there any scenario where like a lead gets plopped on your desk and you pick up and dial right there?
Of course. Yeah, there is that time if there's a lead, but I'm usually doing some sort of research. Like, this research sounds like it takes forever. When you get really good at this, you can start to do this research in a minute or two. Like, if I get a lead that plops on my desk, I'm at least going to go on their website. I'm at least going to click the person's LinkedIn profile and kind of get a sense of their trajectory and where they're at, just so I have some sort of, and at this point I can just, come up with that value statement in seconds almost, just because I've been doing it for a while.
Right. So you understand like this, the way it's going to go, the breakdown.
But for my top 100, I'm going to probably spend 10 minutes per those groups. and just continue to understand that. And then from there, it's just maintenance. You know, you can spend 30 minutes and just make sure that you're up to date on all of them. Google Alerts are another huge one. I forgot to mention that. Google Alerts are huge. We just got into one of our largest opportunities that we've gotten into this year, last week, through a Google Alert. This group got mentioned in some article. They got recognized for something that they were doing mid-COVID. We picked up the phone, called the CEO. Hey, notice that you guys were recognized here. Notice this is your goal. We can help you. Can we have a conversation next week about that? He took the appointment. They're now in the pipeline for the next 30 days, and it's looking like a great opportunity.
So you have Google Alerts set up for all top 100 accounts. Do you do prospects within those accounts, or do you do people or just companies?
Both. So I'm at least going to do the top 4 people in all of those companies.
I know that was something I know we spoke about a little while ago. Abby and I were talking. We've been playing around with it as well, because I think that's a really underutilized tool. It's one of those things, like when you say it, you're like, oh, obviously get a Google Alert, but it's one of those things that it doesn't necessarily happen. It should be part of, like, as you're putting a lead in the CRM, it should be the second step after that. Like you go and then you immediately, bam, once you've qualified it, get the Google Alert going. So that way you can constantly be getting information.
Well, and it can even help you on the flip side, right? Like if you're trying to set an appointment with somebody for next Thursday and you got a Google Alert that they have their big gala next Thursday, well, now you know not to set the appointment for next Thursday because that's going to be their busiest time. And you can even mention that, and chances are the person on the other end is going to really appreciate that you know that. They're going to want to talk about it, and it just is a rapport builder. So it's not just things that are like huge, oh my God, this is a big lead into my account. It can also just be just things about their business. You know, I know Steph's leading a webinar today. That's big. Let me, you know what I mean? Like I can call you with information about that and kind of take it from there. So
that would actually, I feel like, Ab, if someone called you and was like, hey, I understand you're running this webinar today, you would be very receptive to that, as would I'd be very receptive to that.
I would be very impressed.
You actually know that. You actually know that.
It's easy. That's all over LinkedIn. All you have to do is click your profile and you know that.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the Google Alerts are totally underutilized, at least in our business. And that's like one of the biggest things so far as I'm taking away. Like, I want to know more about your best practice around that.
Around Google Alerts?
Yeah, just, you know, I mean, you talked a little, you know, obviously you talked about it. You do it both on the company and the individuals, for individuals, but I'm assuming you've trained your team that way as well. Any other best practices around that we could take away from this?
No, I think it's also understanding, the only other thing I'd say around it is understand who the top 4 people are in the account. It's not always your C-levels. It's not always the same in every account. You know, it's the whole thing. If you go to work with a bank, everybody's a VP and the titles are all weird and you have no idea who the actual person that you're trying to get to is, right? Manufacturing is similar in that way sometimes. So depending on the industry, depending on the organization, who are your top 4 people? Is it a user? Is it like, it's always going to be the CEO or owner, obviously, but who are your top 4 people? Make sure you're constantly being updated with that information, because that's going to be big. The other thing is LinkedIn searches too. You're going to look for, say your primary DM is your CFO. You might want to have CFO openings pop up. That way you're aware, like turnover happens all the time and it's usually a trigger for some change. People look to change technology all the time when that happens. So, you know, you'd be surprised how many times I get a random, hey, there's a new CFO opening in this territory. And I'm like, that's crazy. I did not realize that Jim left, you know, and now it sends you on a whole search and that becomes a whole, you know, trigger for you to get into that account. So it's just being aware of what's happening in your territory and knowing your territory better than your competition.
That's actually a really good one. I really like that tip as well. Like to understand, yeah, you're right, because change comes with new leadership. We see it all the time. Like Abby and I were just having a conversation where, you know, that's how our business has grown over the past 20 years is someone will, you know, go and join another organization and take them with it. Same as when you were probably at Paycom. Now at Re-Leased, when they leave, they take you with them. So
yeah. Well, even with that for you guys, I mean, usually when people change at that type of level, they're either looking to bring in their own tech stack in our world, or they're looking to bring their team in, or whatever the case is, right? So that's usually a trigger for some sort of change within the organization.
So, I mean, you mentioned Zoom Info, LinkedIn, Google Alerts. Like we're seeing a lot of people talk about video prospecting tools. Have you guys ever thought about utilizing anything like that?
I haven't. I personally haven't. I've heard it works well. Curious if anybody on this call has, and it's worked well. Would love to hear more about that. But I personally haven't really had too much luck with that. I just stick more so to, I'm a big believer in LinkedIn DMs also, like the private messaging there. If you can get somebody with just a short, concise message there, it's just a different avenue to get their attention. But outside of that, I've never done the video, no.
Yeah, if anyone on the call is using video prospecting, definitely would love to hear any success stories or how you guys are finding it, what you're thinking about it, because it's something I'm seeing a lot more of right now. So we're actually going to have a little interactive piece right now where we actually want to run a poll to the audience. So guys, we want everyone to participate. Click on what you think or what you guys feel is the most important metric that you measure on a weekly basis as a salesperson. Or if you're not a salesperson, what you feel is the most important metric to measure weekly as a salesperson. Would it be calls and outbound activity? Would it be appointments and meetings, opportunities added to the pipeline, revenue, or something else? And if it's something else, you definitely use the chat box. Let us know what that something else is because we'd love to hear from you. Because I know Dave, I'm sure you can say the same. I've been at different organizations where sometimes the CRO just wants just revenue. That's all we want to know. What did you close this week? What deals in the pipeline? Sometimes it's, hey, measure these 30 metrics every single week and report them on a massive spreadsheet. What are the top 30 things? And that can be a lot sometimes. So like, I'm curious to get an idea from you, like what you find to be the most important metrics that you keep an eye on weekly. Like what are the most important for you?
Sure. Should we wait until we get these results or no?
No, I think you can go. I think it's good.
Okay. So for me, there's two. Connections on the, okay, cool. To me, there's two. One is revenue is always important. I track revenue. I think revenue is it's always the most important, right? So if there's ever a time where revenue is not most important, even on a weekly basis, to me, you will have your priorities not in alignment because that is ultimately the goal of every single salesperson is to bring in that revenue. Outside of that, though, the most important lead measure to me, and really the only one that matters, is opportunities added to the pipeline. Because, and the reason why I say that, is if you're adding the right number and right value and opportunities to the pipeline each and every single week, all of the other metrics should suffice themselves. And that's a good way to know that those other things are happening. So for example, and appointments are a lead indicator too, and I'm tracking that probably secondary, appointments actually set. Because I don't necessarily care how many calls it takes somebody to set their appointments in a week. You know, we can work on those skill sets in a one-on-one. It's helpful to know that information, and it is an important metric to just know, like, for example, if I have somebody making 200 cold calls in a day and they're busting their tail to set these appointments and they're only setting one, well, there's a skill set gap there that as a leader, I'm looking to try to help them solve and fix. But if I have somebody that I know can do the job, they've been a top performer for a long time, I know they know how to set appointments. I don't care if I'm looking for them to set 6 appointments. I don't care if they pick up the phone 6 times or if they pick up the phone 600 times. It does not make a difference to me as a leader. My conversation with them at that point is just, again, what more could you do? How much bigger could your pipeline be? It's more of that future conversation of how bad do you want this for yourself? And what could this look like if you actually did more? But in terms of what the most important ones are to me, it's always going to be revenue added to the pipeline because that is the most important lead metric in terms of what you're looking into the future, 30, 60, 90 days out from now of what you're going to perform. Everything else you can kind of make tweaks around in order to get that pipeline higher and obviously get that revenue sold. And the reason why I say revenue on a weekly basis too, because I know it's a little bit different. Most people are looking at revenue on a monthly or a quarterly basis. If you have the monthly mindset, and I kind of even fell into it in June a little bit myself, and that's why we're getting our deals here at the end of the quarter and at the end of the month. When you have the monthly mindset, which we will get them, but when you have the monthly mindset, you almost get to a point where things just slip and it becomes okay. And now all of a sudden you're not only in danger of missing your number because something's now slipped to the last week of the month, but you're also wasting all that time in between with a prospect that could have closed way sooner and you could have spent that energy on a different prospect. And that's a very underrated thing in my mind because when we talk about time management, if I can spend 2 weeks on a brand new deal on a pipeline, getting a new pipeline account in there, that's way more valuable than trying to close a deal that could have closed 3 weeks ago. So I'm always constantly asking myself week in, week out, why, if I really think it can close in July, why can't it close today? Why not? Is there a real reason why not? And if there are, can I take steps to get that moved up or not?
Give me an example, because I find that sometimes people, oh, awesome. Okay, cool. So we have opportunities added to the pipeline and appointments and meetings are the top. So interestingly, revenue is kind of like is fourth out of on this list. So
I'm curious
opportunities added
for
to
those-
the pipeline.
I'm curious for those who said other, what the other is. If you guys want
Yeah.
to throw that in the chat, it'd be cool to see.
Yeah, me too. Definitely be interested. Yeah, no, I agree with you, but give me an example, because I find that as we've always said, like it kills all deals. It doesn't actually improve things. Giving someone like, hey, you have 3 to 4 weeks to make the decision isn't actually helpful. Even if on their end, that's what the feeling is. We know on the sales end, like it's not gonna make it easier to close if you push it out 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So
You're almost never going to get that deal.
yeah. So like, how are you like creating that sense of urgency? You're right. If it can close in July, why can't it close today?
Yep.
What are some, like, do you have verbiages that you use? Like, how are you creating that sense of urgency really?
So this is where, again, I think it goes back to your mindset with looking at an account. If you're using the same thing over and over again to try to build urgency, you're probably failing 99% of the time. So you need to look at every situation individually. And the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what natural intrinsic urgency do they have?
Okay.
If they don't have natural intrinsic urgency, you probably did a bad job in your discovery. Right? Like if you're looking at yourself and you're like, hey, there's no reason why this group would close today versus a month from now, you don't know their pain well enough. You can't, because if you don't have anything you can exploit, like, hey, Steph, like, I know you want to wait a couple weeks, but you've been telling me how badly you really want to get 5 more candidates a month into your pipeline from a recruiting standpoint. I don't really see how you're going to do that if we don't move forward on this, tomorrow. Happy to wait, but if we're not able to, you know what I mean? Like that logic behind it, if you don't know their pain well enough, you're probably missing something. The other thing is, a lot of times you can just leverage a calendar close. So for example, if somebody wants to go live in September, a lot of times you can just logically walk them back into the signing date. You can walk them back into it. So you know how long your implementation takes for certain things. And again, this is industry specific. So I'm talking about technology right now.
Yeah.
But like for me, if I know my window's 60 days, well, they actually do need to sign now. Could we make it work in a couple of weeks? Yeah, but that's way worse for my company. And honestly, it's also worse for the prospect. So if I just logically pull out a calendar and say, okay, cool, let's just look at this real quick. Boom, 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 boom. Really, we need to make a decision the next week. What's standing in the way between you and I doing that? Why can't we do that today? So that's a lever you can pull. If you're close enough to a prospect, which COVID's made it pretty tough to do this, you can pull the personal level. Just, hey, it would really help me out if you're there, right? If we can just make this decision sooner. Sometimes you can pull that, sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's tacky. You got to use your emotional intelligence with that one. Then there's also the sense of laying it out on paper. This is my personal favorite. Looking at it and saying, okay, from where I see it, you guys have decided you want to leverage us. We've gotten to that point. These are the steps that are outstanding. You told me you need a reference. You told me that you need one other person on your team to see the system. You also need something else. Let's say there's 3 things there. Great. And you literally walk through. So perfect. So can we get you the reference? Are you available tomorrow to speak to somebody? Yeah, sure. I could talk tomorrow afternoon. Fantastic. I'm going to connect you guys via email this afternoon. You want somebody on your team to see the system. I know we're going to have a reference call with them tomorrow afternoon. Are you available on Friday with them to see the system and make sure that we're all checked off on there? Yep, that's perfect. Awesome. Is there anything else that I'm missing that we need to take care of as a team? No, we're good. Now they're aligned with your process. You took their process and you mirrored it with their process. And essentially what you can do at that point is say, okay, great. So from what I'm seeing here, come Friday, there's not going to be anything standing in the way between us and an agreement. And so my expectation would be that we move forward on Friday afternoon following that meeting. And just let them object. If they're going to have an objection at that point, then you just add that to your list and find a logical way to tackle it and almost put them in a corner to where there's no logical reason why they would not move forward with you. That's my opinion.
Well, and I feel like you kind of have, like, even like the tone and the approach, I feel like has to be set from the beginning. Like you said, you need to know the pain point from the beginning. But I think also if you kind of set the stage as like really taking control of the sales process and going through things very, like, as you said, like you send out an agenda from the beginning. And a lot of this is sales 101, but you're right. If you're not like pristine about these steps right now, then that's kind of how you lose some of the deals that you could win otherwise by not executing perfectly every single component. Because if they realize that Dave is in charge of the sales process from the beginning, then there's because often you get that feedback of like at the end, oh, they're getting pushy. Why is the sales rep getting pushy? Like you can hear, you hear that, but if that is the approach, I'm not saying pushy, but if that approach is something that you have the mentality of the entire time, then at the end, it's not a negative. It's not being viewed as like, oh, this person is pushing me to close. You're viewing it as like, no, Dave's just continuing on and being who he's been since the beginning of the process.
Well, it's a good point you bring up actually there too, because I was more so focused at the end, but the beginning is also equally as important in terms of driving that urgency and driving value. I had a boss one time that said almost always, it was like her tagline, closing's not an event, closing's not an event, closing's not an event. And at first I didn't really get what she was talking about. And then the more I thought about it, the more it started to click. Like, you are closing literally from your first time you set an appointment with somebody. Little triggers like when you set the appointment. Is it within 5 business days? Is it 2 weeks out? Did you let them push? Did they show up to the demo? Were you okay with that? How did you allow that, like, little things along the way drive that urgency? And you get to a place where at the end, closing isn't like it's not a pushy thing. It's just what happens. You know,
it shouldn't be a surprise. There shouldn't be a shock at the end. Did this actually closed?
Yeah. And the other thing too, you mentioned from the beginning that I think is really, really important. And I think this works very well if you have a first meeting with C-levels. If you actually get them to a point where you're level set with them, they're bought into evaluating your system, you tell them exactly what meetings are in your process and you book them out in that first meeting. And that way they know, it gives you a backstop of when you're expecting them to move forward.
Do you find that to be assumptive, because you're not using the first call then as your discovery? You're going in there with the assumption like, yeah, this product is solving your needs.
Well, you're doing a little both, right? So usually if you're meeting with a C-level, you're not always doing the most discovery, because they might not even know. Like, if you're talking about a CFO, right, he or she might just be getting reports from their team every single day, and they don't know how much work goes into it. So what you're doing is you're almost level setting with them on an industry level, you're level setting with them on a personal level, at a professional level, that whole thing. And essentially what you're doing is you're saying, okay, we're now level set. I think our solution can provide value at a high level. You're doing it more at a business level, here. They're like, yeah, sure, I'm committed to evaluating that, having my team evaluate that. Then you say, perfect. My steps to my process, what I would like to do, and I think it would put you guys in the best position, is next. I would love to, you're definitely welcome in all of these. I would actually prefer if you joined us for all of them. But the next steps are for me to do a full-on analysis and discovery with the primary user on your team, maybe a couple members of your team. Then I would like to show them the system. I'm going to build a business case and an ROI for you. I'd like to come back and present that in a feedback meeting to you. You know what I mean? Like, walk through what your steps are and make it a very logical process that they're going to want to follow and they're going to want to have their team follow. And they'll book those meetings out right then and there. And then they know, it gives you that framework, you know? They know in 3 weeks, Dave's going to be asking for my business if all goes well.
And I know you mentioned like meeting, obviously people want to meet with the C-level first. Do you ever, like, when you instruct your team, is it like C-level, like they absolutely must go in for that? Or are you like, what is your thought on like having them meet with someone like on the ground level first?
I mean, you obviously always want to meet with the C-level first. When I was a rep, I actually had way more success on the ground level, but it's just a harder cycle. Yep. My rule is basically get in where you can get in however you can get in. But every time you have a next meeting, bring someone new to that meeting. Always.
Always bring someone new to that meeting.
Yeah. So like if I have a meeting with a user for the first call, my next call, I either want that user to bring in another user, or ideally I'd like to go up and level up. And I'd like to bring in either a C-level, or depending how low you go, you know, you might have a couple steps before you get to that C-level. But if you're doing that, the whole key is building enough coaches to get there. And the other thing that I've leveraged effectively is, I can't take credit for this idea. Former colleague of mine came up with this, but pre-calling the executive to where essentially you're going to go into a first call with a member of the team. You call that CEO or CFO before that meeting, and you're basically like, hey, I'm meeting with John today at 1:00. I really wanted to invite you to that meeting. I know I've been trying to reach out to you for some time. I'm really excited. We're going to cover X, Y, and Z. Obviously, if you can't make it, I promise you I'm going to follow up and tell you exactly what value is there. And what that does is it almost eliminates it sounds very uncomfortable, but it's actually not, because if you think about it, you've been reaching out to both these people the entire time. And that eliminates the user blocking you from going up, because you've already had the conversation with their boss that you're going to go call them no matter what.
I was actually just going to ask if that's ever backfired, because I remember like when I like in my previous lives, like doing something like that, I feel like would have been almost as overstepping. But you're saying you haven't gotten, like, have you ever had a backfire?
I mean, it depends what you call backfire. So I've had C-levels call me and be like, "You're not meeting with my team," you know? And to be honest, that might seem like a backfire, but because you got a cancellation, but at the end of the day, they were never going to buy. That guy was never going to buy. They were so not receptive that they were going to call me and yell at me for meeting with the team. He wasn't in position to buy. He was never going to listen to what was going to happen. I was going to go meet with the team. They were going to present it to their boss, and their boss was going to be like, "I don't know what the hell you're doing. You're wasting your time. Don't even look at this." So to me, that's not a backfire. I'm spending more of my time with people that can buy from me. So, I've never had it backfire in that sense. Where it has been really helpful and really effective is sometimes you'll have the user that I don't know if you either want to call it like they're flexing a little too much or they're scared of you kind of going above them.
Yeah.
But if you kind of almost level set and be like, in the meeting, "Hey, can we bring John into the next meeting?" I don't know why I keep picking on John.
Yeah.
If we can bring John into the next meeting and they're like, "Oh, well, I'll meet with John." You can almost just level say, "Oh, well, I've been talking to John for the past couple months. I promised him actually that I'm going to give him a call and kind of updated him on our meeting." So it almost like takes the edge off of, oh, they've already talked to they're already in contact with them. And I've seen more relief come from that. And then they're more willing to be your coach and help you through the process because they feel like you have their boss's ear already.
Yeah, I like that. I like that one. Okay,
So-
I know we're, in terms of time, I want to be conscious of it. I just have one more question that I want to run through, kind of just about new revenue streams, because we work with a ton of companies in different specialized industries, and we've heard that some are considering adding new products or services that aren't necessarily aligned with their ICP. So what are your thoughts on adding a new revenue stream as a reaction to what we're seeing in the market right now?
Depending on the industry, I think it could be a good idea. For us, we've taken probably the opposite approach. We've doubled down on who our ideal customer is, and we're really trying to service them as best as possible because we know that's where we're most likely to get a win and a really strong win and a good fit. All of the churn that we've seen in our organization due to COVID, most of it's been from groups that, to be honest, probably weren't a great fit to begin with and are now starting to see it. Going back to the original question of, is your service a necessity for the business or is it a want to have? The people that are viewed as a want to have are usually not your ideal customers, or they're the ones that have some, issues with it. Those are going to be the ones that kind of fall off. So I think it depends. My thought is probably more double down on who your ideal customers are and don't stray too far away from that. But that varies, obviously.
So then for this, basically for our takeaways, guys, I would think research sounds like it's key, staying super relevant and really hunkering down on your ideal customer profile and just having the right mindset, coming in, not necessarily changing what you were doing, just continuing to be even more hyper relevant and hyper focused on what makes the most sense. And like you said, finding the people who are still willing and able to buy right now.
I think that's exactly right. I think it's the old cliche in sales, control the controllables. I think that's more important now than ever before. You gotta make more controllables for yourself, and literally control them better than your competition ever could. And then couple that with finding the people that can and will buy. And then that way, because you gotta increase your conversion rate. You can't lose right now.
Yes.
You can't lose.
Well, yeah, because you just don't have as many at bats, and so you need them.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, guys,
Okay.
I'm going
to jump in. We do have a question in the chat feature. And guys, we've got another almost about 8 minutes left. So definitely jump in and write down any questions that you have. We'll jump in. I have a question from Evan who had to jump off the call. But Dave, this is a question around setting appointments via Zoom as opposed to the previous way. Sounds like Evan's managing a team of more outside sales reps. So as opposed to the previous way of being able to stop out of their office, they're getting pushback. His team seems to be getting a lot of pushback from people saying that they're not camera ready at home. And they would prefer to not get on the camera. So in those cases, they're shooting for the phone call. However, in a relationship-based industry, it's taking longer to secure that face-to-face interaction with the new client. So therefore delaying that personal feel to newly developing relationships. So what are your ideas around this and any, suggestions?
Yeah. You can't force somebody to get on a camera. So that's, the first thing I would say. And I think especially in that first interaction, you're almost going to make them feel uncomfortable if you try to force that. So my approach to that would be make sure that first interaction goes well. And then in your second or third interaction, when you already have that rapport with them, kind of almost make a joke about it. Oh, like we're never going to see each other. We're never going to meet face to face. Like just do something to kind of guilt them into it. What I'd also say is just be logical about why you need Zoom or why you need GoToMeeting or why you need whatever platform you're going to use. Like for me, it's, well, hey, listen, I can't show you the product if we're not going to jump on a Zoom. Like if you want to keep it a phone call, we can keep it a phone call, but I at least need you to get on that platform with me so that
Right.
eventually I can make a joke about that because I know I'm going to develop a relationship enough to do that,
Right.
And then
And it's harder for,
I don't necessarily need to see them, but if they see me, that, you know what I mean? Like you're having
Right.
still that interaction with them and they're feeling that.
right. Yeah.
That's
and
what I've definitely done with a few customers actually. Like I just did it the other day where we were on, like I sent her just the Zoom invite. I'm like, you can feel free to call in, but I want to show you my face. I want you to know there's a real person on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And she ended up turning her video on as well. And it ended up being a great, like a much better call because of that. Because I was like, I'm happy to put myself out there. Like by no means you have to do that. I just want you to know there's a human on this side.
Yeah. I think be a human with it overall, but still try to get what you want and use logic to do it.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot with our clients where like obviously we've all done a ton of Zooms since COVID, and definitely had a lot of clients where the first couple, like we as the, as the company trying to sell, always want to make ourselves available via Zoom with the picture. But I've seen that too, where it was like 2 or 3 calls later where they finally put on the camera. So that's a good suggestion. Just keep doing it, keep being visible, and then hopefully your audience will follow up. So we have another question from Brian. When I've been prospecting and talking to first line managers, they tell me their CRO would be the decision maker, but I've not spoken with the CRO and they don't feel comfortable giving me an intro. How would you reply to that approach? Should I reread that? Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah. No, I think we just lost Dave for a second. Yeah.
Oh, okay. He can probably read himself in the chat feature. Dave, you with us? Oh, he froze. He made it all the way to the end.
Made it all the way to the end. Sorry, guys. If he doesn't hop back on, Brian, we will make sure that he gets your question answered and we can send that out to everyone if that's the case.
Yes, we have 5 minutes left. If there's any other questions, I don't see any in the chat feature.
Hey guys.
Oh, he's back.
Perfect.
I am back. I don't know what happened. Abby just went frozen, and I was like, "How do I get back on quickly?"
No problem.
Dave, do you want me to reread the question?
Is it the same one, or are we talking about a different one?
Yes. I didn't know how when you dropped.
Yeah, CRO question.
A different one
CRO,
from Brian.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, could you repeat that for me?
Sure. When I've been prospecting and talking to first line managers, they tell me that their CRO is the decision maker, but I've not spoken with the CRO and they don't feel comfortable giving me an intro to the CRO. So how would you reply to that approach?
Sure. So
or how would you reply to that, or approach? What would your approach to that be?
So there's a couple aspects to it. Great question, Brian. I think it's something that's always a struggle, because obviously you want to get to the DM and sometimes users don't even want to waste your time, which isn't a bad situation to be in overall. One thing I would say is, going back to the research element, know that before you even call anybody, right? So that's something that you can probably just understand about the organization, know who their CRO is, and just understand that they're going to be the decision maker. So know that going into it by doing your homework. The second piece of it, I would say, is when they say that, there's a couple different routes you can take, especially on a cold call, is put them at ease. So it's to Steph's point, like, you still want to set that appointment. It's still valuable to meet with them. If for nothing else, you're going to get a ton more information about the organization that you can use when you talk to their CRO. So be like, look, I get that. That's totally fine that the CRO is the decision maker. I still want to meet with you. I mean, I called you very specifically because you're going to be the primary user of the platform, or you're going to be the one that's going to be, working with us on a day-to-day. I want to make sure that you're comfortable before we ever even had that conversation. So almost empower the person on the other end of the line to be like, look, I get it. We're going to be a team if we go to the CRO in general. Let's still meet. And if they take the meeting again, you're either going to have them make the introduction at a later time after that first meeting, or you're going to get enough information to go to the CRO yourself later, if it doesn't go anywhere, and kind of get back in the door.
That's awesome. That's great advice. So I think we are out of questions and just about out of time. So Dave, I thought you provided some great insight. Hopefully everyone got some good takeaways. So
Brian has one more question. Brian has one more.
Okay. Wanted to ask one more question if you have time. How do you coach your team on daily planning? So in my industry, it's something that we do all the time and emphasize to new hires. How and when you do this, and what is the most important as you are setting your daily planning, if you have time for this question?
Yeah,
3
of
minutes.
course. 3 minutes. And also for anybody else that has some questions and doesn't want to ask them in a group setting or just wants to connect and chat further, I'd love to chat with any of you guys. My info's on the end of the call there, and you can always connect with me on LinkedIn too. But to answer that question specifically, I think if you're in a management role, again, I look less about the metrics and I more so want to give them a framework, because I operate under the fact of, if I hired you, you probably have that go-getter mentality. You probably have an internal motivation, and you don't need me looking over your shoulder every day for everything. So a couple things. One is never miss a one-on-one with your leader, because that's going to be the most important time of the week to reset, learn, grow, and make sure that everybody's on the same page. Do that. If you are a leader, it's the most important thing you can do in management. Do not miss that. And then the second piece of it is just actually block out time in your calendar as if it was a prospect for different things. So put mandatory prospecting times in terms of cold calling in there. Put your research time in there and make it mandatory blocks that nobody's going to interfere with you. Customer success can't mess with that time. Your manager can't mess with that time. The only thing that's going to mess with that time is literally closing business. And just map that out for the whole week. So look at Monday, this time, and this time is going to be dedicated to this. And have my one-on-one at this time. Tuesday, here's my call session. Here are my meeting slots. And just stick to that. Respect yourself, respect your calendar. And if you do that, you'll have time for everything that you need to do. Anything you miss probably wasn't that important to begin with.
That's great. Thank you so much. So I know we're just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for joining. Hope you enjoyed hearing from Dave and Stephanie. And so there's going to be a recording that we've recorded. We're going to send it out to everyone. Everyone's contact information, Steph, Brian, myself's contact information is here, and that will be sent out as well. So thank you again, and we will all talk to you soon. Be safe.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Can't
Thank you, guys.
enough.
Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks, everybody.
Good luck with the pup.
Thank you. All right. Bye.